It's business 101 for the most part. Here's a statistic. Over 90% of single truck owner operators have no accounting system whatsoever. None.
Wow.
None. They throw their receipts in a bag or a box. They wait till the end of the year. They dump it on their tax preparer and say, I need a tax return done. That's the extent of their accounting. And it's over 90%.
Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and we've got another great show for y'all today. We have Kevin Rutherford. He is a CEO of Let's Truck. He's coming back on the show. We're going to talk about how to make trucking great again in 2025 and beyond. So, Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Well, great to be here. So 2025 already, huh?
I know. We are recording this a few days before Christmas. For anybody who is listening, we plan to drop this episode the first week of January. So Kevin and I just had a good little therapy session before we got started about social media and, a lot of just holiday stress that's going on. And, stress is really no different, I think, than any other. Well, stress in this industry, there really is no time frame for it to exist. It kind of is just always there, right?
It is, and you know what? I would even say in our life today, stress is just so predominant, and it's stress that our body's not used to. This is actually a big topic of mine. I spent about 2 years working on a stress protocol to help people deal with stress, because what we were seeing was we started about 10 years ago helping drivers get healthier with diet. And we had tremendous success, and people have maintained it for the last 10 years. Right around the end of 2020, we started seeing people with bad results that hadn't had bad results in years.
Oh, interesting.
Some of their markers were starting to change. They were gaining some weight again. And at first I thought, well, okay, you've just kind of fallen off the bandwagon. We just got to tighten things up. And it wasn't the case at all. And I just kept digging and digging. And I thought, you know what, this is just stress. And I mean, 2020 was a pretty darn stressful year. And that's when we started to notice it. And I started working on a protocol. One of the things I figured out, most advice about stress is to just try to avoid it. Like you got to go take a walk in the park, and you got to go, meditate and go, watch a good movie or whatever, which is fine. Except what we were finding was you could take 2 weeks off and meditate all you wanted, and an hour after you were back into the stressful situation, you were a wreck again. And I realized that the best way I can describe this, stress is like a muscle. Our stress response is like a muscle. And the more we have to use it, the weaker it gets. And if you were to sit around on the couch all the time and all your muscles got weak, sitting around on the couch more isn't going to fix it. And that's what we were seeing. People just keep using these strategies to avoid stress, and it worked as long as they could avoid stress. But what we have to do instead is we have to build that stress response so that we're able to manage more stress, because you can't get away from it. And it turned out to be things like cold plunges, short duration, high intensity resistance training, some infrared therapy, some breathing work, and we track it through HRV, and we were able to get people's HRV back up. And then all of a sudden they would say, well, things just aren't as stressful anymore. When nothing really changed. The stress was exactly the same. It was their response to the stress. The problem is that you got to do these things pretty often. And then people are stressed out, like, well, I don't have time to do my stress protocol. Well, I don't know what to do about that yet. So that was a big deal for us. I spent a lot of time on that.
And I'm glad we're kind of just getting right into it, because one of the bigger topics that you focus on, especially with Let's Truck, is that you've been helping drivers for years, helping them get financially and physically fit. And it sounds like mentally as well. And I guess it's sort of, my to piggyback off of what you just said, because I want to know how people can get started, but maybe you've already recognized that there are certain issues in your life So how do you know where to start? How do you know if it's physical, if it's mental, if it's, something financial, if it's all of the above? How do you kind of give yourself a life assessment?
Yeah, the one thing, and you said this the way we've always said it, and we should probably stop doing this. We've always separated, everybody does it. We separate physical and mental.
Hmm.
Why do we do that? It's our body. Our brain is an organ, our heart is an organ, our kidneys an organ. We don't treat any organ differently except the brain. And we thought that the brain functioned differently, and it really doesn't. All of the problems we see in the brain are the same metabolic problems we see in the entire body. So when we feel physical pain in a joint or a muscle, we know there's inflammation, right? Well, your brain can't feel pain. So when your brain is inflamed, there's no pain. What there is dysfunction, brain fog, Alzheimer's. All of the mental conditions involve inflammation of the brain. And the same things we do to get somebody metabolically healthy for their body also fix the same problems with the brain. The other issue with a lot of the stress in our thought process is how many people today are on SSRIs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. It's rampant. I think it's like the second most popular class of drugs now. We have kids on them now. Well, it turns out the neurotransmitters that they're trying to manipulate with these drugs, 80% of them are created in our gut. It's our gut bacteria that creates our neurotransmitters. So if you've got how many people do you know with digestive disorders now? If you've got a digestive disorder, you've got a brain disorder. And that's where a lot of the stress comes from. So we can treat the human body as one entity, and the things we do to fix all the metabolic stuff, which is just a really clean diet, is number one. And clean, that word gets so overused, but what it means to me is the more foods you can eat that doesn't have an ingredient list, the better off you're going to be. Real whole food, the way we see it in nature, doesn't have ingredients. And the more of that food we can eat, the healthier we're going to be. And that's brain health. It lowers stress levels. It's not a fix-all, because the people that I first identified this in, including myself, had really cleaned up their diet. We're coming up on 10 years now. And a lot of these people have been doing it for 10 years very successfully. So the mismatch now is our nervous system. So here's the other thing that I think helps people understand this. Every stress response in our body is really the fight or flight response. That's what stress is. When we are in what we call the parasympathetic mode, which is also the rest and digest mode, that's out of stress. Stress isn't affecting our body. When we go to fight or flight, that's when the body releases cortisol, adrenaline. We get that rush. Now, can't you see that fight or flight response feels a lot like stress? That's really what it is. Stress, the fight or flight response shuts down our digestion immediately. So the longer you're in stress, the worse your digestion is going to be. And then it's a vicious circle. When your digestion's messed up, it's going to mess up your stress response. So we just have to understand that our fight or flight response, which served us really well as hunter-gatherers, kept us alive, is destroying us in today's world because we're surrounded by stress. Some people never get out of that mode.
And it all really starts with your diet.
It does.
And so it starts with your diet. And so coincidence. I just got the Casey Means, the book for my mom, because she was going through some health issues. They wanted to put her on, pre-diabetic medicine. She suggested maybe I could change my diet. And the doctor literally told her that if she wanted to just focus on her diet, then she could find a new doctor.
I
And
know.
so she said, to
Isn't
hell
that
with
awful?
him. and she started a new diet, and she's lost 20 pounds since then. And so I got her this book. Hopefully, this show will air after Christmas. So I got her this book for Christmas to help her with that, in that regard.
That is a great book, by the way. And I had Casey on my show.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, she was fantastic. And I think I got really lucky. I had a pre-release copy of the book, and then I asked her to come on the show. So I had her on the show pretty early. And then obviously you've seen how popular she has become. Now she's doing podcasts with Joe Rogan and Tucker. And I'm pretty sure, although now I have the relationship, I could get her back on the show. But had I not gotten her on early, I probably wouldn't have.
Wow. So, because it was just ringing true that I had heard her for the first time on Tucker, and that episode kind of changed a lot of things for me, diet wise, just mental health wise. So some of the things you were saying, it sounded like a lot of the things that she had been preaching. How long, I guess, to have a lot of these, I guess, sort of. Because what she really speaks to, and I'm sure your episode covered that, is just the infrastructure, or the institutional infrastructure of our diets, of our food systems within this country, just really have a negative impact on all of our bodies, not just truckers, but it seems maybe, truckers with their, sedentary lifestyle, it impacts them the most. Is that a fair statement?
It is, but I'll tell you, it's not as much the sedentary lifestyle as people think. It really is the fact that, look at their access to food. The worst place you can eat in today's world is at a restaurant. They are awful. All of them are awful. They all use seed oils. They all use all kinds of preservatives and prepackaged foods. And eating out today is just toxic. And these guys are gone 2 and 3 months at a time for some of them. They're eating every meal out. They're eating the wrong foods when they eat it, but even if you eat the right foods when you're out, you're still going to struggle. So we teach them how to pressure can their own meat, so they can take, a month or two's worth of supply of meat with them without needing refrigeration. We have them fermenting vegetables so they can do the same thing. So the real key for them isn't here's the other thing I tell people. Typical client for me might be 350 pounds. 400 isn't out of the question. I mean, I get this all the time. And I will tell them right up front, I know you've heard it over and over and over. It's like the two words are interlinked forever: diet and exercise. Stop saying it. They're two totally different things. They accomplish two totally different things. We shouldn't talk about them together. The last thing a 400-pound person wants to hear is you have to exercise. Hell, they can barely get out of their chair. And you want them to go to the gym and try to maintain some heart rate for an hour? It's not going to happen. And it's not necessary. Turns out exercise is not an efficient way to lose weight. It doesn't work very well at all, because while it's burning calories, and calories are almost meaningless, it is also increasing appetite. And then you have to try to starve yourself, and nobody wants to do that. And that's why it doesn't last. I have helped people lose 200 pounds without one single minute of exercise. They don't change their activity level at all. Weight loss is about the food we put in our mouth. The way I can say this is, there's health and there's fitness. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. At the moment, I'm not very active because I'm busy all the time. And, in the summer, I'm a lot more active. I'm healthy right now, but I'm not all that fit. I've been pretty sedentary for a couple months now since summer ended, and I'm not fit, but I'm very healthy. My blood pressure's low. My blood sugar's where it needs to be. I don't have any weight issues. I don't have any joint pain. I'm not on any prescriptions, but I can't call myself fit. Fit comes from exercise and activity. And I'm a bigger believer in resistance training than aerobic training. But we do those kind of things for fitness. Health is all about diet and our environment, keeping the toxins out and, cleaning up. Think about all of our personal care products. Think of all the stuff we slather all over our body. Our skin is our biggest organ, and we absorb things right through our skin. And we slather toxins all over our body all day long. So I help people clean up all their personal care products and cleaning products at home. We're to the point now where we have one cleaner for light bulbs, and we have a cleaner for a floor, and we have the cleaner for the sink, and we have one for the counter, and we have one for stainless steel, and they're all toxic. And we're using, what works really good? A vinegar-based cleaner will clean everything. Cleans glass, it cleans chrome, it cleans your dirty stove. They make concentrations up to 30% that'll almost take paint off. And yet they're all natural, nothing toxic about them at all. And, so you just look at our environment has become so toxic itself. So the weight and the health is about food and environment. Fitness is about activity and exercise. But I think we should separate the two, because we always tell people you have to diet and exercise. Even the commercials for Ozempic, along with diet and exercise, they always say, well, I can help you here. Throughout the Ozempic, we don't need it. Forget the exercise for right now. Focus on the diet. We'll get you to your normal weight.
Are you in freight sales with a book of business looking for a new home? Or perhaps you're a freight agent in need of a better partnership? These are the kinds of conversations we're exploring in our podcast interview series called The Freight Agent Trenches, sponsored by SPI Logistics. Now, I can tell you all day that SPI is one of the most successful logistics firms in North America who helps their agents with back office operations such as admin, finance, IT, and sales, but I would much rather you hear it directly from SPI's freight agents themselves. And what better way to do that than by listening to the experienced freight agents tell their stories behind the how and the why they joined SPI. Hit the freight agent link in our show notes to listen to these conversations, or if you're ready to make the jump, visit spi3pl.com.
And that almost feels more attainable at first, because I feel like if you're that significantly overweight, you have a problem, but it all feels so daunting and you don't know which direction to go to.
Yeah, and telling somebody you have to restrict calories to lose weight will never work in the long term. The only way to restrict calories is to be hungry. If you weren't hungry, you wouldn't be restricting calories. You would just eat till you were satisfied, and that's what people do. When you eat the right foods, that is how you should eat. I tell people when I show you what foods you should be eating, I never want to hear you say you were hungry. And I never want you to think if you're hungry, but you don't eat one more thing, that's going to help you lose weight. It won't. If you're hungry, eat. If you eat and you're still hungry, eat more. When you're not hungry, don't eat. Don't mindlessly snack or just eat because you're bored. But if you're hungry, eat, and you should not be hungry. And I've helped people lose, and that's why they can lose 200 pounds and maintain it for 8 years, because they're not fighting hunger all the time. If you're counting and restricting calories, you're going to be miserable.
And that was you got into a little bit of drama this week while
I did
during the holidays, where a lot of people were not too happy with your calories don't matter sort of mindset. For people who may not be aware, I would imagine that everything you just said is why you believe that the calories in, calories out don't matter. So What should people do instead? Is it, because I know you're on an all carnivore diet, I believe, right?
I promote all carnivore. What I recommend is some form of, we could call it a paleo diet. And paleo just means we're only going to choose from foods our hunter-gatherers ancestors had access to. So, and then you can get into some controversial things like dairy and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, our hunter-gatherers, there were no food factories. The only foods they had access to existed in nature, and they ate them the way they existed in nature. That's the start. So those are the foods we can choose from if you want to be healthy. That eliminates preservatives. It eliminates added sugars. So that's the start. But we found that people are so sick, that's not enough. That the more metabolically sick somebody is, the more foods we have to eliminate out of the diet. The ultimate is what we now call the lion diet. Have you heard of that one yet?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
So here's the lion diet: beef, salt, and water.
Oh, wow.
That's it. That's the most extreme. We actually call all of these diets elimination diets. We're going to eliminate whole foods or whole classes of foods, and there's been tons of them over the years. What we're now learning is the more foods you eliminate, the more healing that diet becomes.
Hmm.
So the more sick somebody is, I had a woman on my show just a couple weeks ago. She was 5'9", and she had had mental issues since she was a teenager with anorexia and anxiety and depression and all kinds of things. At 5'9", she had actually gotten down to 70 pounds.
Oh my God.
And had horrendous mental health issues, schizophrenia.
Ugh.
I mean, she was in bad shape. Her life was miserable. She went 100% carnivore, and it's gone. Everything.
Wow.
She works out now. She strength trains. She's really tall and lean. But you look at her old pictures and you look at her now, and she just looks fantastic. And now she teaches this, and that's why I had her on the show. But the sicker somebody is, the more foods we eliminate and get down to beef is the most nutritious of the animals we eat, and water is the only liquid humans need to survive, and a little bit of salt, and we see people heal like that. And some of these people decide not to ever come off of that. And we try to help people, add back in. So my diet would be better described as keto. Very high fat, because I thrive on fat. That's just something I've found about myself. I can eat about 80% of my calories in fat.
Oh, wow.
And really do well. That's saturated fat, beef tallow, duck fat, pork lard, all of it, butter. Moderate protein for me, and low carb. And the lower carb I go, the better I feel. So mostly mine is animal products. I love dark chocolate, so I eat dark chocolate every day. I think honey has some pretty special properties. So some local honey as a sweetener, a little bit of white rice, maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks, and fruit. And that's primarily my diet. And I feel fantastic. I mean, 61, no prescriptions, no weight issues, no joint pain, my digestion. I tell people, I don't know that I have a digestive system. And they look at me like, what? I don't know that it exists. There's no feeling. There's no sensation. It just, everything works the way it's supposed to work. And I went through 50 some years of fighting digestive issues, and they're gone.
And it's all from your diet, from what you're putting in your body.
Just food. Yeah. I'm not a huge believer in throwing supplements at everything. There are supplements that work. There's no doubt about it. And I sell supplements and I use supplements to help people. But my approach is, if somebody comes to me, first time we're talking, they want to know what to do, here's the first test I give them. I want you to see if you can go 7 days without eating anything except animal products. Meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. Eat as much of that as you want, but don't eat anything else for 7 days. And if I can get them to do it, they're hooked because they see incredible results in just 7 days. Joint pain disappears, their brain fog goes away, their energy levels get better. And once I can get them to see how powerful that is, then they're usually hooked. And then my next step is, do this as long as you can. When you get tired of this, if we want to add some vegetables back in or a little bit of fruit, depending on where you are with blood sugar, we can do that. But let's try doing this for as long as you can. And if we make it to 30 days, then we'll take a step back. We'll review some things. And there's probably going to be a couple supplements I'm going to recommend. Almost everybody needs to supplement vitamin D. Just don't get enough of it. And minerals seem to be a problem. So electrolytes. Other than that, I try to use very targeted supplementation and then stop it as soon as I can.
What about Celtic salt?
Absolutely. Any of the
I take that every day.
Any of those, we have the pink Himalayan salt. We've got, I almost have a salt collection. I have black salt, I have red salt, I have volcanic salt, I have Celtic salt, I have French salt. I've got, we actually have a store in Portland that sells nothing but salt.
That's awesome. What are the differences between all of these different salts? I thought Celtic was the best, so that's why I bought that one.
So what we're looking for is a naturally occurring salt, not the iodized, or whatever the technical name for salt is.
Like regular table salt, I guess, that
Regular
most restaurants have.
iodized table salt. Throw that stuff away. Don't go anywhere near it. Any of the naturally occurring salts, pink Himalayan, Celtic salt. The difference is they've got a lot of trace minerals that we don't get in other places. And they don't have the junk and there's some chemicals they put into salt, anti-caking agents, and you want nothing but salt. But all of those kind of natural, Redmond salt is a really good brand that's been around for a long time. The one thing I love about salt is you buy a thing of pink Himalayan sea salt that's been in the earth for a couple million years and it has an expiration date on it. Boy, I'm glad I got this before it expired after 2.5 million years.
That was one of the dangers, because my mom has been started on this diet journey, and just she's trying to find those little lifestyle tweaks, and I'm a little bit further along in the journey, so I'm trying not to sort of nitpick a lot of the changes that she's making. So I guess how do you balance that approach where it's like, oh no, you're wasting your time? Because she bought Himalayan salt. And I kind of told her, well, you got to be careful about where you get it from because of the way that it's mined and there's a bunch of chemicals in it and things like that. And how do you, I guess, suggest nicely or point them in the right direction without sounding?
I'll tell you the question I get all the time that I can't answer. And it's almost this one. People will do this. Their results are incredible. They really are. It's hard to describe this change until you've gone through it. And good human beings, the minute they experience this, they want to share it with everybody. And, carnivores, we can get pretty annoying and obnoxious. And, we're always talking about food. And, so I tell people, look, I don't know how to influence somebody else to start this or to stick with it. I can do it on the air because I just talk and people will come to me. The hardest part is when you try to do it with somebody you love. The closer you are to somebody, the harder this is to do. And I even know most of the practitioners I know won't work with their relatives. They partner with other practitioners and they swap relatives so they don't have to work with their own. Because it just doesn't work well. And people will call me, Kevin, I'm so glad I did this. You told me this. They give me all their results. They're so excited. And they go, but I'm so frustrated. My wife just won't listen to me no matter what I say to her. So that's a struggle. I tell people, look, the best thing I know is to do it yourself and be a good example. Don't be obnoxious about it. Don't try to push it on everybody else. And hopefully somebody asks you. And when they ask, don't try to overwhelm them. And I'm bad at that because I could go on and on and on for 8 and 10 hours and tell you everything I know about all this. And I just have to take a step back and say, look, let's make this one change for 7 days and see what happens. And then you build some trust. I know it's going to work. If they do it, I know it's going to work. Then you build some trust. They see the results. Now they're willing to try the next thing I recommend. And I think what the big advantage for me, why I've been so successful at this, is simply the fact that I'm on the air every day. And people can call and ask me these things every day. And then they can call back and say, I tried this and it worked great. And then other people hear that. And then they'll say, but I tried this and it didn't work. And I'll say, okay, well, then let's try this. And there are people I've been working with for over a year, a little bit at a time. And that's the best advice I have. Try not to overwhelm people. Try to be a good example and try to meet them where they are.
Brokering success demands a battle-ready strategy. Tide TMS equips freight brokers with the ultimate battle station for conquering a tough market. With Tide, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform where rate intelligence and quote history converge on a single screen. It's not just a page, it's a strategic command center designed to help brokers win. Tye equips your team with all of the data they need to negotiate with confidence and allows them to communicate directly with carriers and customers from a simple control base. Revolutionize the way your brokers perform by giving them a competitive advantage with Tye TMS. For more info, go to tai-software.com/battle stations, and we also have a link for you in the show notes to sign up for a demo.
Yeah, because I think just personally speaking, my mom is much more. I'm further along on the process. She's definitely come a long way,
Yeah.
and then it's trying to convince dad and brother that my dad famously has had a Reese cup and a Dr. Pepper as his breakfast for 20 years. And getting him off of that, we have successfully finally got him off of that. So now he makes one egg in the morning and he notices a difference. And so that little bit of a change is already noticing a difference, but he also works outside. He owns his own lawn care business. He's, run it for 40 years. And so the son, and he's, 61 years old. The sun is just brutal in Florida. And so I worry about him. And I'm like, you need to put some Celtic salt in your water and eat more vegetables. And he doesn't want to hear any of it.
No, and that's awesome. And I love the way you're doing it. And you're doing it. You're making progress. You got him to change a lifelong habit. That's a big deal. I mean, that's a big win. Really is. You brought up something that shocked me about this. So 10 years ago, I made the changes. Joint pain goes. I have no markers of RA anymore. And I had RA in my 20s. I had markers.
Arthritis, right?
Rheumatoid arthritis, yeah. Had markers my whole life until I changed the way I ate. And then my joint pain went away. And after a while, I thought, I wonder if I should check for the markers. And I did. They're gone. No evidence that I ever had rheumatoid arthritis. So it's pretty incredible what we can accomplish with it. But, I go slow, take it a little bit at a time. But there was something else I came across. And I was reading online one time and somebody was talking about how they gave up all this stuff and that they no longer burnt when they went out in the sun. And I said, what? Come on, that's just stupid. Let's not get ridiculous about this stuff. And then I went and did the research. And I had not been eating the thing that they claimed caused this problem for about 6 years when I'd learned this. And I thought, I have burnt my whole life. I mean, I am so pale and 15 minutes in the sun and I am beet red. And then 2 days later, it's gone and I'll burn again. And I've been that way my whole life. And I love being outdoors. I love water sports. I used to put sunscreen all over, which is horrendous. That stuff is toxic. Then I at least switched to wearing, long summer kind of clothes, fishing shirts and that kind of stuff. And I would avoid the sun. And I thought, could they be right? So I went out in the sun that day. And I can feel it when I start tingling. Mm-hmm. And I was out in the sun for like 30 minutes, which was a long time for me. And I thought, I started to panic. I'm like, I'm going to be burnt. I know it. And so I went in later that night. I'm like, I'm not feeling anything at all. Went out the next day and tried an hour. That is unheard of for me. After an hour, nothing. And I just kept pushing it. All this summer, I've got a 6-acre homestead in Washington that I garden out there, and I'm doing a lot of land clearing all summer. No shirt, no hat, no sunscreen, 6, 7, 8 hours a day out in the sun. I never burn.
Wow. What are you doing?
Seed oils.
Oh.
That's what causes it. But here's the problem. When you quit them, it takes almost 400 days for all of it to clear your system.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't realize there was a change because the change happened years after we stopped consuming them. But once this was pointed out to me and I tested it and I started telling it works every time. Wow. People I know who burn all the time, redheads, total freckles, get seed oils out of your diet, give it a couple years to clear, and that all goes away. Isn't that crazy?
What is technically a seed oil?
Okay, so anything that they've tried to call a vegetable oil, and they use the word vegetable because we thought vegetables are healthy, so vegetable oils must be healthy. You can't squeeze a carrot and get oil out of it. You can't squeeze a canola. Not that there is a canola. Canola comes from the rapeseed plant. But you don't squeeze the vegetable to get oil. The oil comes out of the seeds. And go look up the process just for the fun of it one time, what it takes. There's chemicals, there's crazy amounts of heat. The fats are so damaged by the time we start consuming them. And here's the thing, this is why this is such a big deal. Every cell in your body, the cell wall is made of fat. And when you build every cell with bad, damaged fats, you're going to be sick. It's actually seed oils. This isn't quite proven yet, but I think it's going to be. The root cause of diabetes is not sugar. Sugar becomes the problem, but the root cause is seed oils, because diabetes is really insulin resistance. Your cells won't accept any more sugar because insulin is the lock that opens the cell and lets sugar in. But your cells stop responding to the insulin. And then the sugar stays in your blood, and that's when you're diabetic. Well, that the cell won't accept the insulin because the signaling part of the cell wall is damaged. And it was damaged by bad fats. It's all the seed oils in our diet.
What about like avocado oil?
Avocado is not a seed oil because, one, avocado is not a vegetable, it's a fruit, and we don't get the oil from the seed, we get it from the flesh.
Okay.
And it should be expeller pressed, not heavily processed. That's why olive oil is okay. Olive is a fruit, and we squeeze the olive itself, not the seed or the pit.
Oh, interesting. I guess I just assumed that avocado oil, because of the seed that's inside of it, was also a seed oil.
We get the oil from the avocado flesh is loaded with fat.
And so avocado oil is okay.
It's one of it. There are only 3 oils that come from plants that I recommend. That's avocado, olive, and I would be really, really careful with olive oil. Most of the olive oil in this country is fake. It's seed oils. And even really good olive oil gets damaged by light. It's not a really stable oil. Coconut oil is the other plant oil. And coconut oil is amazing. It's loaded with saturated fat. It's got all kinds of good stuff in it. It's an antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. So those are the 3, and I would just be very careful of olive oil. I use some olive oil cold. I don't cook with it. And I buy it directly from a family farm in Greece.
Oh, wow.
And the cans are dated when it was harvested. They only put it in cans, not bottles, because that protects it from the light. But for the most part, I use all the animal fats: butter, lard,
Beef
tallow, duck fat. Duck fat's one of my favorites. Man, duck fat is so good. So you should be cooking in all animal fats.
Okay, so we have spent the first, I'm looking at the clock, 36 minutes talking about diet. And I think that that's a really, honestly, a good place to kick off what, some of the other, I guess, drama that's going on within the trucking industry. Because if you have, good diet, if you're taking care of your body internally, if you're starting to, figure out your fitness plan and working that all in as a driver, then it's going to help you to better be able to deal with a lot of the stresses that you probably can't control within the industry.
That's a good point. Yep.
So speaking of the stuff that maybe we can't control, there are a few topics that I have seen on X and have seen, in LinkedIn and a lot of different discussions. And I wanted to kind of get your feel of a couple of the big ones. And so the first big one is broker transparency.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
For, I guess, a high level eagle eye view.
Sure.
What is the drama around broker transparency?
Let's just be real and upfront, because I've been doing this for 40 some years. I was a freight broker for a short time. We can go all through that. But I think the drama is really just frustration on so many carriers that got into the business, and I'm talking about one truck guys, and that's my sweet spot. That's my market. That's where I've always worked. They get into business with no plan, very undercapitalized. They have no accounting system when they get started. And all they hope to do is, run enough to pay the bills. If they can pay the bills, they're probably not complaining. When they start to fall behind on the truck payment, or they need a tire and they have to go buy a recap or a used tire because they can't afford it, then they get frustrated. And then they start looking to blame somebody. And this, the first place you got to look is the mirror. What am I doing wrong that I could make better? And there's always something. Before we go blame somebody else, the easiest place to lay the blame is the broker, because that's where the freight comes from. They're stealing all my money, the whole thing. But I think the frustration comes from is we have a lot of people that get into this business and don't have any business sense, and then they don't seek out any education. I think the solution to all this is education, not the government. The government's not going to fix any of this stuff. Education will. Let me give you a number that just shocks people. And this it's a little bit of an outlier, but it tells us what's possible. I have a single truck owner operator that I work with. He came to my big conference, CMC, back in 2010, I think. His wife now works for us. She's one of our employees. He kind of works for us, but he runs one truck by himself, one driver, one truck. And his net profit in 2023 was $274,000.
Wow.
Yeah. He dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. He's smart. He's really smart. He just didn't like school. He just doesn't like traditional learning. But he got hooked on learning about his business and accounting. And I take a little bit of credit just because I showed him the ways to do this, but then he took off with it. And that's the kind of money he makes now. I mean, that's just incredible. The average single truck owner operator out there probably isn't making $80,000 a year, and he did $274,000.
And so I guess for folks who may not be able to, connect the dots, broker transparency is some kind of law that was passed.
Let's go back to that. So we're going back to the Motor Carrier Act of 1980. That's what we call deregulation in the trucking industry. The one thing people have to understand, when we say deregulation, the only thing that was deregulated was the financial aspect of the industry. So people say, what? I don't even know why they call it deregulation. We have all these regulations. Well, of course you do. Everybody does. We deregulated the financial part. The government, prior to 1980, the government controlled the rates in trucking. It was government controlled. And the way they did it was they didn't set the price. You understand supply and demand, right? This is the one I try to get these guys to understand. What the government did was, when you filed for authority, they just turned you down. They just wouldn't give new trucking companies authority. So they controlled the supply, which controlled the price. Because if there aren't enough trucks on the road, the price just keeps going up and up and up. If you wanted authority, you actually had to go out and find shippers who would write letters saying they needed more capacity in that lane. And then you might still go to the government and they might say no. And your authority was not blanket authority. It was lane by lane. You might have authority to move freight from Cleveland to Dallas, but not Dallas to Cleveland. And then what you had to do is you had to trip lease. You had to go find a trucking company that had the authority in that lane, and you would sign a lease for one trip. And we used to have magnetic door signs for our trucking companies. We would stick them on the door while they were working that one trip for us. It was a horribly inefficient system, and it cost us all a ton of money. What would happen towards the end, there would be trucking companies that were almost bankrupt, and they would sell for millions of dollars because somebody wanted their authority. That's how bad it got. 1980, they said, look, we don't need to protect this industry anymore. The original idea was we have to we can't have too much competition. This is too big of an industry and it could just fail. So we're going to protect some carriers and let them become stable. And then in 1980, we decided, you know what, we don't need to protect them anymore, that this can work as a free market. And that's what changed. At that time, there were no freight brokers. That industry didn't exist. Now, people will go, oh, no, that's not true. C.H. Robinson was a broker in the 20s. They were a produce broker, not a freight broker. C.H. Robinson started as a produce company. They brokered loads of produce and then brokered the move of them too, but they owned the produce. They were a produce broker. Well, once all these new carriers flooded into the market after deregulation, which is a good thing, we got a bunch of new small carriers in, where are they going to get their freight? The old legacy carriers had sales teams. They would go out and find the freight for the carrier. Well, in the beginning, the broker worked for the carrier. When the brokerage industry first started, the broker did not go out to a shipper. They went to carriers and said, I'll go find you freight. And we paid them a percentage. So the transparency was, because we were the carrier paying them direct, we had the right to see. But once that whole market shifted, which took time, now the brokers go to the shipper. That is their freight. They signed a contract. They are the ones that have a contract with the shipper. Then they go find a carrier to move it. The problem is they left that clause in there about that every party to the transaction has a right to see the documents. It was just a leftover that was in there because of the way the broker industry worked then. It makes no sense now, but try to convince somebody of that. They just think they should have the right to see this because of that one clause. Do you know any other business that has to disclose its margins to anybody?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I'm trying to think of one.
Nobody in business has to disclose their margins to somebody else, especially the person they're negotiating with. But that's what these people are asking for. But because they don't even have the basic understanding of a free market and how business works, they're stuck on this one paragraph in 371.3 that they're allowed documents. First off, it's only after the transaction's over. You don't get to see it before. Then what happened was brokers, when people started pointing out this and saying they wanted to see the documents, brokers said, well, we don't like that. So the broker contract, it almost always now includes a waiver. And the waiver is waiving your right to that clause. And then some of the groups, OIDA and a bunch of others, came out and said, you can't waive away your rights like that, except you can. Supreme Court said so. The Supreme Court said when the law or the regulation is written, if it doesn't explicitly say that you can't waive this, then you absolutely can waive it. If both parties sign the contract with the waiver is legitimate. So what would have to happen now is Congress is going to have to take this up again and change the regulation and make it non-waiverable. But I don't see that happening.
And so that's where I guess a lot of the arguments are around is, should this be a thing or should this not be a thing? What are the ripple effects on the rest of the industry? I think there were, I have a couple questions on Twitter about this in particular, or X. But there was one from Stephen Rue. He works over at Freight 360, great group over there. And he said, if carriers get transparency as they wish, what is the benefit to them? If there is any benefit, what's the effect on the overall market? Will transparency actually combat fraud? There's a few questions in there, so just curious on what your comment would be.
Sure. And I actually know Stephen, and him and I have discussed this and talked about it. And so here's a couple things. First off, let's tackle the fraud issue. I solved freight fraud a long time ago. Had anybody listened to me, we wouldn't even be facing this right now. So what I try to teach my small carriers and owner operators is The load board is a tool. It's not where you get your freight. And they're like, what? That's what it's for. No, it's not. Here's how I think you should use a load board. That's where your potential customers are. And they'll be like, what? There's hardly any shippers on there. No, your potential customer is a broker. What? That freaks them out. But that's absolutely true. You're providing a service to the broker and they're paying you. How is that not your customer? They don't like that. But I said, use the load board to find the brokers that have freight in your area and the kind of freight you want. That's your contact. Reach out to them and start building relationships. I even say, if you want to put yourself in the top 1%, schedule an appointment, go see them in person. Nobody ever does that. You know how relationships work. You could talk to somebody on the phone for 20 years. The first time you meet them in person, the whole relationship changes.
Yep.
So go meet them. Your truck has wheels. You can go anywhere you want. Go meet them. They'll be really impressed. And they are your customer. So, and then I say, find 3 to 5 good brokers like that you build a relationship with. They understand you. First off, you're going to get the best freight that never makes it to the load board. The best stuff never gets posted. It gets moved with relationships. So that's the first thing you're going to do is you're going to cut all your time and headaches down and all this onboarding, and you're going to get better freight. But here's the other thing. If I'm only working with 3 to 5 brokers, what does that do for freight fraud? It almost eliminates most of it. We know who we are. The freight got on the wrong truck. I pull your stuff every week. The one freight fraud we don't address with this is them stealing carrier numbers and that kind of stuff. But if they steal my number and they go to a broker I work with, that's not going to work for them either. So had we just worked together, brokers and carriers as an industry worked together, this freight fraud may have never even occurred. But we left that wide open because I have single truck guys that work with 50 to 60 brokers in a year.
Wow.
And I identified
you almost
that.
need a CRM to keep up with all of that.
And they don't have one. So they don't keep up with any of this. They can't tell you the last 10 brokers they worked for. They don't even remember them. I figured this out because one of my early businesses was doing tax returns. And I would get all these 1099s, and I'm like, what are you doing? And here's what they do. They go to the load board. They search for the load they want. The next click, and I know this because I work with the load boards and they store all this data. The next click is sort by rate. And they just start calling the highest rate on the board. Well, if I do that today, and then 2 or 3 days from now, and I need another load and I do it again, what are the odds I'm going to get the same broker again? Just about 0. So this is what they do. We actually have a term for it. We call it one and done. We call it, when you go to the load board, you're chasing the rate. And then when you call it, it's one and done and you move on. And you wonder why the brokers don't care about you. Why would they? You're never coming back. So the freight fraud, I think would go away. But here's something else. I use this phrase a lot on this topic. Be careful what you wish for. If we got transparency, did you ever watch the show Shipping Wars?
No.
Okay, don't. That's not worth watching.
I'm trying to think of which channel that I have seen those commercials, and I've said to myself, I need to watch it, but I haven't watched it.
Don't not as entertainment. I watched it because you can learn a few things. So basically, the way Shipping Wars works is these guys on the show, whether they were a hot shot or a tractor trailer or whatever it was, they would follow these little owner operators around and kind of document what was going on. But they were all getting their freight from a website called UShip.
Yes.
UShip, you could go there if you needed to move a car or a big piece of furniture, or you could actually connect directly with carriers that could move this for you, even as an individual. But it's a bidding site. So the rates are all transparent. Somebody bids on that load and I see what they bid and I can bid. What does that do? When you can see the rate, a bidding war drives the prices to the lowest possible point and then somebody takes it. Everybody in trucking makes fun of the show. Oh, look at those idiots taking that. Who would pull that kind of stuff? This is what you're asking for. You have total rate transparency, and I can see what that carrier moved it for. I'm just going to go in and cut it by 2 cents. And then the next person's going to cut it by 2 cents. And so once I can see the rate, and look, the more efficient you are in running your business and the lower your cost is, the more you can undercut these guys. So the worst operators should be the ones hoping we never have rate transparency.
Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I never even thought of seeing it from that perspective, but it makes total sense. I wonder, why do you think so many, single truck operators, owner operators, why do you think they follow the same path of just relying on the load board?
Just an ignorance of how to run a business really well. It's just what they know because it's what everybody else does. Oh yeah, I got my authority. Now I need an account at the load board so I can get freight. And then that's all they do. The other thing they do is you've probably interviewed people from either truck stop or dad or both, right?
Soon.
Okay.
We are in talks, but I have actually interviewed the CEO or the former CEO of UShip. So she's not the CEO anymore. She's going off to other paths, but it's an interesting conversation nonetheless.
Yeah. So, like I said, the load board is there I think it's a great place to find good brokers to work with. And if you've got those 3 to 5, once in a while, you might hit a dry spot and somebody might not have any freight and you've already got an account, go to the load board and grab a load. I'm fine with that, but it shouldn't be the bulk of your freight. And the load boards have also created incredible tools around rates. I can dig down into every lane in the country and they have carrier negotiation tools. And if I go in there, it'll say, look, here is your negotiation power in this lane. And they're basing it on supply and demand, and it's real-time data. If you're in Chicago today, Chicago is loaded with flatbeds and there's hardly any loads posted. Well, guess what that's going to do? The rates coming out of Chicago today, they're going to be awful. Maybe you just want to bounce over to Cleveland or something, but all of the data's in the load board to go figure all that stuff out. So these guys pay for that, don't even know it exists, never use it, and they're using the load board completely wrong. It's why I have such a strong partnership with Truck Stop, because the whole point is to try to educate these guys on how to use those tools.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess, for a lot of folks, they just get into a habit of doing it one way, and it's difficult for them to, very similar to their diet. They get used to the thing, and change is very hard, and they don't want to address it, and they don't want to your first point that you made, look in the mirror and kind of address those issues with themselves first. They don't, it's very difficult, I think, to admit when you're wrong, or maybe that you've wasted a lot of time and money.
You know what? That's a really good point. I learned early on in business that not only was I going to admit when I was wrong every time I was wrong, because it's the only way you're ever going to learn and become right, but then the other thing I learned was I learned way more from my mistakes than I learned from my successes. Successes sometimes are just pure luck.
Right.
And you look at it, you go, wow, that was great. Look at that. But you had nothing to do with it. And you don't learn anything from that. Mistakes will always teach you something. When you do something wrong, there's usually a consequence, and you can usually look at that and say, okay, why did that happen and what can I do better? So I actually have a model that says if I have a new project or a new idea or something I'm working on, I want to make as many mistakes as I can as fast as I can make them.
Yep.
And then I'm going to get up to speed, and a lot of people, their ego just will not allow them to do that. Here's another clue. My most successful clients, by far, in the 30 years I've helped people get into this business and run small businesses, my most successful clients are always somebody that came outside the industry. They're not longtime drivers. The longtime drivers get all the worst habits. Their ego is too big. You can't tell me how to run a truck because I've been driving a truck for 42 years. My daddy drove a truck and he taught me when I was 7. And look, I'm not trying to teach you how to drive a truck. I'm teaching you how to run a business, but they can't separate the two. To them, they know everything there is about driving trucks because they've been doing it a long time. And I agree with them. They're really good at it. Driving a truck has nothing to do with this business. The easiest clients to work with, I can make them a success every time. 40 to 50 years old with a business background. I can make them successful every time because they just listen. They'll just do what I lay out the plan, they follow it, they succeed. And the next thing you know, they've got 10 trucks and they have almost no experience in the industry.
And so would you say that trucking is still, because I hear, I follow a lot of drivers on social media, and, a lot of them have kind of made the comment that trucking isn't what it used to be, and that, there's a lot of stuff that's going wrong in the industry, and why would anybody even want to come into this industry? Do you think that it's still a good job to have, provided you are willing to have the business acumen behind it?
I do. We can talk about that a little bit, but let's start with this. Tell me anything that's the same as it used to be.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Nothing is. Everything about our world, our life, everything has changed because these people are talking about 3 or 4 decades. That's how long I've been in it. And the biggest group of drivers right now are baby boomers that are about to retire. So these guys that have been around for 3 and 4 decades, of course it's changed. Everything does. Is it as good as what it used to be? No, I don't like the industry as much as I used to. There isn't the kind of camaraderie, and you hear that a lot, although that was never a big thing for me. The one place that I spent the least amount of time when I did drive was at truck stops. The only thing I did at a truck stop was get fuel. That was it. Nothing else. I didn't park there. I didn't buy stuff there. I didn't take a shower there. I don't like them. There's nothing about them that made me want to be in a truck stop. I went in and got fuel. I'd park at a rest area. I'd park in the back of a mall. I'd park anywhere I could find, and I'd eat from grocery stores so I can control the price and the quality, better. And one of the things I try to tell people, if I could tell them one thing, try to understand what it means to be a contrarian. And it will work really well for you in so many areas of life. I teach people investing. If you want to be a decent investor, do the opposite of what you see everybody else around you doing. It will work better than anything else I could teach you. I had a saying when I used to do a lot of the financial planning. I would say, as soon as your grocery store clerk is giving you stock tips, it's time to get out of the market. That's a really good sign. It's just time to get out. Stocks are so popular. The market must be doing so good. If your grocery store clerk is talking about stocks, it's time to get out. So I have a contrarian belief in trucking. This right now, today, right where we are, is the absolute best time to get into trucking. I helped somebody get in last January. You should probably have him on your show. This guy was really interesting. He'd never been an owner-operator before. Maybe he had been a little bit, but he wanted to become a carrier, went and got his own authority. He went through some of my programs. He would call my show. He asked me a lot of questions. I helped him do this. You may even see him on X because he's really active. He posts, since he got his own authority and became a carrier, he started on day one. He posts every single load he books. He puts a post up and says, load number 37, since I got my authority, I'm going from here to here. And then he'll comment like, this wasn't supposed, my appointment wasn't until Tuesday. I got there Monday in the afternoon and I called them and they got me in. So now I'm on to another load. And the other thing he does at the bottom of every one of these posts, and he posts every load, and he's got a standard format that he does it in. And at the bottom, it says, it's a kind of a shout out to brokers. If you're looking for a good small carrier that cares about your customers kind of thing, call me.
Wow. Who is it?
Ilya. On X, I believe his handle is Millennial Truck.
I swear I was going to guess his name because I've seen some of his posts and I thought, oh, wow, he's doing, really good social media. So shout out to him. I wrote down that name. So yeah, awesome. That's awesome.
Reach out to him, get him on your show. Brent Hutto's had him on his podcast. And
it's another guest I need to get on the show as well.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this or not. Brent's my co-host on Mondays now.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Brent and I, we do our Monday show together. It's all about rates and lanes and what's going on in the industry. And so Brent's actually the co-host now.
That is awesome. Okay. Yeah. All right. I think I have 1, 2, 3, at least 2 guests out of you now.
There you go.
There
Yeah,
was a
so that idea of I'm not going to fight with the brokers. I'm not going to complain about the brokers. I'm going to market to the brokers because they're my customer. The
smart.
broker carrier summit, he went to that. You know what he did at the first broker carrier summit? He put out an offer to all the brokers there. I'll pull your first load free.
Talk about being able to market yourself. That is
Yeah.
really, really smart.
Yeah.
All
Yeah. So
right.
that's kind of the contrarian point of view. And it works in so many ways. Look at all the people who are being washed out of the market right now. They all started during COVID at the top. You start in the top of a market, and the odds that you can survive the bottom of the market are pretty slim. Start at the bottom of the market with a plan that works, and then the top of the market is just pure gravy.
Yeah.
So I helped Ilya start at the bottom of the market January of this year, and he's killing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is really cool to hear because I see a lot of doom and gloom,
Yeah.
on social, especially from drivers about how the market is just, it's crap and they're not sure if they're going to be able to survive. And I feel for them, but to your advice, I mean, or to that point, it shines. I think you're helping, give drivers a flashlight in the dark to
Yeah.
understand, what pathway to take in a multitude of ways. There was another, a little bit of drama. I think I've kind of been, I've experienced this as well, especially with the truck parking club guys.
Oh, yeah.
I've had them on the show, love
Yep.
them.
Me
But
too.
anytime I post a clip from one of those conversations, I get a lot of replies about how they're a scam and they're stealing money from truckers, or they
The-
are, making them pay extra for something that they got for free. What is your
Hey,
take on that?
hey, Blythe, while they're telling you that, they're probably drinking bottled water.
So they're
Right?
stressed. They're
Right?
stressed and they're getting poisoned from the plastic in the bottle and the water.
And they paid more for it than gas when it's at every faucet. It's free. Why would you pay for it? Why would you pay more for water than you pay for gas? But now you're going to complain about parking? But why do you think parking should be free? Just because it has been, and it's not free, by the way. They also complain about how much they have to pay for anything in the store at the truck stop. Well, why do you think you have to pay that kind of price? Because they provide a giant parking lot out there that is outrageously expensive to own and maintain, and they don't charge you for it. So you're going to have to pay for it somewhere. I have been saying this for about 10 years since the whole parking thing started coming up as a complaint. And I said then, and I continue to say it now. And we are when I get off this call, I'm probably going to be talking to Reed over at Truck Parking Club because they want to partner with us. I think they're going to be a part of our CMC.
Awesome.
And I've been saying forever, if you want better parking, be willing to pay for it. It's simple as that. If Truck Parking Club succeeds, what are they going to end up with? Competitors, right? Somebody's going to look at this model and go, hey, look, this works. You can actually make money with parking. And then a competitor is going to look at Truck Parking Club and go, hey, look, if we put in these amenities, we can. The more that happens, the better parking we'll get. If you want parking to be free forever, just get used to truck parking lots with big holes in them and crashes all over the place and no amenities and all the issues we've always dealt with. You want better parking, just be willing to pay for it.
I mean, it's always reminded me a little bit of like like a gym, where if you
Yeah,
want those better amenities, you're definitely going to have to pay a fee to
right,
access those amenities, and then the upkeep and the upgrade of it's not free.
right.
And you have to, I mean, that's the cost of running a business. And so maybe it kind of, gets back to your point of, if you understand sort of business basics, then you would understand why a facility would like to charge money for the upkeep of those parking spaces. And I think, to play the other side a little bit, their argument is, well, I used to get these spots for free. This money is coming out of my pocket. Why isn't it coming out of the shipper or the broker's pocket? This is another fee for truckers. The complaints are kind of endless.
Yeah, and I get that, but wait a minute. Why doesn't it come out of the shippers or the broker's pocket? It does. That's where your revenue came from. You took their money and you spent it on parking. It did come out of their pocket. Where else would it come from?
And it's what you kind of have a choice there too. You don't have to haul for that shipper either. And, maybe
And
that's an amenity that they could offer you as well with different partnerships.
or you can just structure your rate to cover that.
True. Very true.
Do we ever say, I want the shipper or the broker to pay my tolls? Well, why do I have to pay a toll? There's all kinds of free roads all over the place. Why do I have to pay a toll on this road? Well, you do, because the state said they're going to build a toll road. You can either try to go around it or you can pay to drive on it. But we don't then look at the broker and go, well, you have to pay this. No, as a business person, you look at the load, you should realize, hey, there's some toll roads. I need to calculate that into my cost. Parking is really rough on the East Coast, so I'm probably going to have to pay for parking. And then you price accordingly. And if there's nobody to pay the price, then you look for a different lane.
It makes sense, but I'm also a business owner, so I think it makes sense to me to understand where those costs are coming from and to structure your rate appropriately. Maybe it's a little bit of just I got the feeling, because anytime I get those comments on the truck parking club posts, I see it as this isn't just one thing. It feels like maybe they're experiencing a lot of pile on from a lot of price increases from a variety of industries, and this is the thing that they're going to blame the most.
They are, but let's think about this. Every one of their competitors has the same pricing problems. Every one of them. It's not like they're being singled out somehow. In fact, they have far more control. Nobody has more control over their day, their cost, everything than one guy, one truck. I understand why employee drivers would be upset if all of this parking starts to be paid and their fleet isn't going to pay it. As an employee, you should not have to pay that cost. That should be your employer that would. So I get it. It's why I don't. The only time I deal with employee drivers is on the health side, because the rest of everything I do is business. And sometimes what's good for an employee driver is in direct conflict with what's good for my customers, which are owner operators. When OOIDA pushed for mandatory detention time, they wanted the shipper to be required to pay mandatory detention time. Well, I get it. For employees, if you're sitting there at the dock and you have no control over this and your employer is not paying you for that time, I get it why you're upset. It's not the right answer to go to the shippers and expect they're going to pay this, and who would ever enforce it. We need to and you have a little bit of control as a driver, go find a carrier that does pay it, and that's how competition works. But as an owner operator, the last thing I want is some group that's supposed to be representing me putting regulations and cost on my customers. That just doesn't look good. That's my issue. I'll go to my customer and negotiate this stuff. And if I can't, then I'll go find a different customer. But I don't want groups that are just going to put a bunch of regulations on my customers, which is why I fight so hard against broker transparency. The system works. Nothing about this makes sense. And all you're doing is asking the government to put more regulations on our customers.
What do you think is a story in trucking that deserves more attention? We've talked, obviously about broker transparency and truck parking, but is there something else that, the logistics audience should be aware of and paying attention to?
Yeah. And I don't, this is what I do every day. I have almost no competition. And I think this is the answer. And I'm not saying it's anybody else's responsibility in the industry, but I'm just trying to point out this will solve a lot of the problems we all fight with. And the one thing I think we're horrible at in this industry is education. I think about all the things we just talked about today, and you not knowing the inside of this, you've never owned a truck, but when I say it, you go, well, that makes sense. And you can see how that would work. And it's not rocket science. This stuff's pretty simple. It's business 101 for the most part. Here's a statistic. Over 90% of single truck owner operators have no accounting system whatsoever. None.
Wow.
None. They throw their receipts in a bag or a box. They wait till the end of the year. They dump it on their tax preparer and say, I need a tax return done. That's the extent of their accounting. And it's over 90%. You run a business. How could you run a business without knowing where your money's going or where it's coming from? But they do, or they try to. And then they wonder why they're struggling with all of these things. Then they get angry, and then they just start blaming everybody else. And this is the state of the industry. So it's why everything we do at Let's Truck is really built around education.
I love that. And speaking of content, what does your schedule look like? Are you making any, adjustments or plans for 2025? Because you broadcast every day, I believe, right?
I do 15 to 20 hours a week on the air. That's just on my radio show. I do 2 hours every week of group coaching. So all the things I talk about on the radio show are the questions you can ask me. We're pretty limited in time and scope. I can't get a lot of background data for somebody. They call me on the air, they have a question. I don't know who they are. I don't know background. I've got a limited amount of time. So I can answer a lot of stuff like that. But if you want to go deeper, then I have this group coaching. And I will go as deep as somebody wants. I have been working for over a year with a family-run trucking company. It's been around for about 40 years and is about bankrupt. And it's really sad. And I've been working with them for over a year. We solved almost all of their problems, but the family started infighting, and they reversed a lot of the stuff they did. Now we're heading back into the problems again. And I think if something doesn't change in the next 60 days, they're going to be out of business. But I've been working with them for over a year. We worked on a hiring program. We worked on a fuel mileage program. We worked on a bonus program. We went from they couldn't get a single call when they tried to find a driver to having a list of 7 drivers waiting. That's what we were able to accomplish. And then they started fighting in the family. I helped one guy who was growing enough that he wanted a kind of a repair shop terminal. I mean, I helped him with the real estate part of it. Here's how we go find the right property. Here's what we've got to do to, make sure it's going to work. So on the coach, that is my favorite part of the week. I mean, I get to use all my skills, and I get to really dig deep and troubleshoot, not just the same surface stuff over and over like my show might be. And then every other week I do a 2-hour CMC, because my CMC program now is a year-long program. So and we are also now an official part of MATS. I think we are the only, I know that's their model now. They're trying to bring more events in around MATS. And I think we're the first. We're the first third party to be an official. So our CMC is 2 days prior to the truck show opening. That's live and in person. And then that program goes on for another year, where I do a 2-hour webinar every other week for a year. So that's really my schedule. I get up, I spend 3 hours on the radio. I get off the radio, I do podcast stuff, because if somebody invites me on the show, I go. I mean, I'll go on just about anybody's show. I love talking. And then I had the call with the Volvo engineer a little while ago, and tomorrow I'll have my coaching call in the afternoon, and Tuesday I'll have my CMC. And so I basically spend my time talking.
I was going to say, what do you do when you're not talking?
No, I'm always talking. If I'm not talking, I'm reading.
Where do you, and that's a good segue into my next question. Where do you get your content inspiration? Who do you learn from?
Everybody I can.
I like that
other
answer.
Industries, other countries. I studied Europe for a long time on fuel mileage. Europe, heavy truck fuel mileage, they've been a decade ahead of us forever. So I get more of my ideas from European magazines and websites and people that I know in the industry. I've just been a lifelong student. I've been following Anthony Robbins. Been following Anthony Robbins since I was 20, and he was probably about 20 at the time too. But pretty impressive. Have you ever seen his fire walk?
No, I don't think so. Is that just where you walk across the fire coals?
Yeah. Yeah, he's famous for it. He does it at his seminars with hundreds, sometimes thousands of people.
Wow.
So I did it first in West Palm, somewhere in South Florida. And that was a 10-foot firewalk. You had a 10-foot lane and you had to walk across these hot coals. And I mean, they are glowing and they've got fires built up there where they're taking new hot coals and putting them on there. And I'm looking at this going, how can this work? I mean, I still don't understand it. So you walk across, didn't feel a thing, nothing. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand this. And it was so funny. About a month later, I'm standing outside on my deck grilling, and I was in bare feet, and a piece of coal must have popped out from the grill, and I stepped on it, and I was crying like a little girl. I'm like, well, this is bizarre. I just walked across 10 feet of this and didn't feel a thing. Then on the big island of Hawaii, right on the beach, we did a 45-foot firewalk.
Is it all mental? Like you just have the brain power to do it?
He sets it up as though it's mental, because all day long he takes you through these practices that you do. And then the mantra that we use is cool moss. So you start visualizing that you're not walking across fire, you're walking across cool moss, and you repeat it over and over. I'm walking across cool moss. And then you get up there, and the next thing you know, you're walking across it going, I'm walking across cool moss. And you get to the other side, and I'm like, I didn't feel a thing.
So I guess it didn't work by the grill, because you weren't saying that.
I don't know. That's what I mean. I don't understand why this works, but it did.
Wow.
So I've been following him for years. Authors that, I've been reading their books for years and years. And I'm a really big believer in education. And I really like to educate myself. I normally don't take a lot of formal classes or programs. I just find somebody that's really good at something, and I start reading, and sometimes even reach out and talk to them.
I mean, that's what social media has, obviously there's a lot of people who talk about, the downsides of it. But I think the beauty of social media is that you can directly connect, or try to directly connect with the people that you admire, the content that, that they create, that you consume. I am curious, are you still doomsday prepping?
I am, as a matter of fact. In fact, think about the world we're in right now. Think about the news every day.
The drones. I was also asked on Twitter to ask you about the drones.
Well, here's the funny thing about the drones. I'm all over the news all day, mostly on social media anymore. I get better news from X than I get from anywhere anymore.
Same.
I used to use a news aggregator to kind of do my show prep. Now I use X. I've got it set up so it pulls in all the stuff I want to see. But if you look around at where we are today, now this drone thing, I don't know why, but as soon as it started, I did not read the articles. I was seeing the headlines, so I knew there was something going on, and I would see these videos, but I wouldn't even really pay attention to the videos. I don't know why I did this, but I started watching the reactions that people were having. Rather, I was paying attention to the people and their reactions, not the story. So I know nothing. I don't know any of the details. And I've purposely ignored it. And it was wild, because just a couple of days ago, you could watch the president talk about it, the military talk about it, the governor talk about it. You could see these videos that they were analyzing. And then there was yet this whole group that was saying there are no drones. They're airplanes. They're just stars. You guys are idiots. And I'm looking at this going, are you kidding me? We can't even agree whether there's drones there at all. It was so bizarre to watch this. So anybody who says they know the last two theories I've seen is we're searching out a dirty bomb or some sort of, they're trying to sniff for radioactive material, or it's Chinese spy drones. But yet we still don't know.
Yeah, I saw all it's funny because, sort of the UFOs, UAPs, like that's where kind of the drones are kind of a segment of that overall debate. And when the government is denying that UFOs exist or UAPs exist, then, my mindset is I don't believe you. But now that the government is saying that they do exist, I'm looking at it like, I don't believe you.
Well, here's the thing. If they come out today and tell us what this is, nobody's going to believe them.
Right.
I mean, at this
I still got to
point,
go to work tomorrow.
yeah, exactly. Somebody I was having a conversation with on X, and they were at the airport, and their flight was delayed because of drone activity at the airport they were going to. She left and went and got on a train. She's traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast on a train today. She was even live streaming, going through Glacier National Park on a train because she didn't want to get on the plane. So yes, I'm still prepping, and we used to look at the preppers as the lunatics. It's kind of the opposite now.
Right.
If you're not prepping, you're the crazy one.
Right. That's to your own demise. You're not part of the plan then.
Yeah, the idea is there's lots and lots of things we could need to prepare for, and many of them look like they're bigger possibilities now than they've ever been. We could have an EMP from somebody like Iran or North Korea or China. We could have they could attack the electrical they could attack the grid through the internet. They've already done it. We know that every one of those countries has already gained access to our utility systems through the internet. And we know what we're capable of. We shut down the entire Iranian nuclear program through the internet. That could all be done to us now.
So
where I talk about it more, and sometimes we'll get on the topic of just being totally prepared. Like, I'm about as prepared as I could possibly be. I bought a homestead. It's in the national forest. I mean, there are reasons. It's got a creek running through it. I mean, I love that lifestyle, but I also feel like I'm pretty well prepared. I can go hide out for quite a while out there. But here's where I talk about it more. I talk about it more in drivers who are thousands of miles away from their home all the time.
Oh, interesting.
And all it takes is there's so many ways our cell phone systems could go down. They're really vulnerable. Now you can't even talk to your family at home. Imagine what that's going to be like. The banking system goes down and all you're carrying are credit cards. You can't get fuel. You can't get food. You're 1,000 miles away from home. What are you going to do? So I really focus what I've learned in all these years of for me, it's a hobby. I have fun with it. I mean, I enjoy doing it because I like food and, being self-sufficient and gardening and hunting and all that stuff anyway. So this is just a good fit for me. I started teaching drivers to pressure can meat because it's a great way to have good, nutritious food on the truck. It's also a great way to put a couple of years worth of food aside. And it's not all that expensive. You go buy the meat on sale, you can it yourself, it lasts for years. So I took a lot of these skills that I've learned and started applying it to, if you're going to be gone and potentially thousands of miles away from home, you might want to think about some of these things. You should have, I wouldn't announce it, but I guess I'm announcing it. I don't travel anymore with usually about less than $5,000 in cash.
Just in case.
Just in case, if banking systems go down, you're screwed. Just think about even 3 days. You're out in a truck, you're sitting in a truck stop, you have no cash, the banking system goes down, and let's say it's only 3 days. You're screwed. You're 3 days of sitting in your truck, and I hope you have a little bit of food in there, or you're going to be really hungry too. So I do talk to them about you can't really carry a ton of water, but what you can carry are good water filters.
A life straw.
A life straw, you could suck that nasty water right out of the truck stop mud puddle and drink it. I mean, I know, but
gross.
I know it is, but that's the kind of stuff I try to get them to be aware of. Do you have some sort of a plan at home if this happens? And that's one of the most difficult communications, and the solution just isn't simple. I mean, you got to kind of get a ham radio license and carry around a portable ham radio. And there are ways to solve it, but I try to at least get them to understand you could be in a place and you might only be there for a couple of days, but it could get really miserable or dangerous. I'm not very political when it comes to lobbying and that kind of stuff. I'll talk about politics, but I'm not into lobbying. I don't see it doing a whole lot of good. If I were ever going to lobby for a law in trucking, and I wish we would just get it nationwide anyway, I think anybody with a CDL should also be allowed to get a nationwide concealed carry permit. It's insane as a driver trying to figure out what all the rules are in all the different states. And the problem is, and people ask me this question all the time, do you know all the rules around the country when you travel? And I'll tell them no, and I don't want to know. Here's why. Because I'm going to break them anyway. If they tell me I can't carry in this jurisdiction, I'm still going to carry. So I don't need to know the rules because I'm not going to follow them. And I'll just take my chances. The sad part is if I ever get caught breaking the rules, then I lose the right to carry the weapon completely. So we just need a better law. I wish we would just have a nationwide concealed carry for everybody, drop all the state stuff. But if not for everybody, I think CDL holders should be able to have that option.
Especially if you are, to your point, not even really doomsday prepping, but it could be like your own personal doomsday that someone is trying to rob you or, break into your truck or steal your stuff. And you need some way to protect yourself. So
that when we talk about the prepping, I really focus more on helping drivers prep in their truck. And it's shocking how many of them said, I never thought about that. Imagine what it'd be like cell phone system goes down. You can't even call home.
Yeah. So, okay. So water, you have to have some kind of water filtration, some kind of weapon, cash. And then that's probably, would you add any more to maybe like a top 5?
Yeah. What we call and what I have in all of my vehicles and I carry a get home bag. What if we actually had an EMP and the vehicles are just toast? Now, what are you going to do? I have probably one of the biggest tactical backpacks I can get that I've got probably a month's worth of pemmican in there for food. And I have tents and thermal blankets and 6 ways to start a fire and 3 ways to purify water and, emergency stuff and rope and all those things that, if I had to survive and start walking somewhere, I could do it. The right clothing, depending on the time of year, that kind of thing. So I really do try to cover all the possibilities that could happen. And you know how I look at this? I look at it like insurance. I hope I never have to use it. But when it happens, I will be prepared. And
that's because I have a bug out bag just in my room. And the next on the list is getting the get home bag in the car just to make sure that I have, some extra things on me.
Here's a great idea. 1 year for Christmas, everybody on my Christmas list got a get home bag.
Oh, that's super smart.
Yeah.
Next year, because by the time people listen to this, that could be your Christmas present shopping is done in the month of January, because that's when people are going to be hearing this episode.
And you know what? Everybody I gave them to loved it. They're like, oh my God, this is so cool. I would have never thought about this. But you show them there's all this stuff, you throw it in the trunk and you forget about it.
Well, I do have a funny story around that, because not last year, I had a white elephant gift exchange with a bunch of my girlfriends. And I got one of those, just sort of all in one, bug out bag kits. Yeah. But, of course, all the girls, they've been drinking. And so they start pulling out all the stuff in the get home bag. And before you know it, the thermal blanket is being used in a non-emergency situation.
You're right. Yeah. No, it's a great way to do it. Give it to everybody else as a gift.
No, I love that idea. And I think that this has been such a fantastic discussion. I came in with I think I have 6 bullet points of what I wanted to talk about. And so these are some of my favorite conversations, because I don't have a list of scripted questions and things like that. Right. We can just talk about, I could just mention broker transparency and you can just go. So that's the beauty of having, other content creators on the show. So Kevin, last few thoughts here. Anything that you feel is important to mention that we haven't already talked about?
One other thing, I talked about education. You know this better than anybody with what you do. Business runs on relationships. It just does, whether it's a relationship with the broker, whether it's a relationship with a carrier you might be leased to, whether it's your shop, your tax preparer, your financial planner, whoever it is, business runs on relationships. One of the biggest changes I've helped people make, and I have a good example, another regular caller. I know him in person. I just hung out with him a little bit down at NASTIC. He's a car hauler. Started as a hot shot, a couple cars on a hot shot trailer, and failed. And he'll admit it. He said he failed miserably, couldn't make any money. Tried to get into the car hauling, wasn't doing all that good. And then started listening to my show and just doing some of the things I was saying. And one of the things I convinced these guys is get involved. Go to the industry events. And I don't just mean the truck shows like Louisville and Walcott. That's where you tend to see the owner operators. How many conferences do you go to like F3 or where it's brokers, it's admin, it's tech? You don't see single truck owner operators at those places. F3 this last couple of years probably has done a better job. And that's Craig being on X, inviting all those guys. You see it. And
hung out with a lot of them. They were great.
Exactly. And when they go to these events at the first, they're like, this is incredible. I get to talk to Craig, or I get to talk to that guy. So Mark started doing that. And he started even going to specialized, like little car hauler events and he'd be the only single truck guy in there. And Truck Stop did an event called Connected, and it was mostly for brokers. And I said, hey, why don't we run a parallel track with owner operators, and I'll teach it, and we'll get owner operators and brokers there together. And that was kind of the start of this movement. Now we have the Broker Carrier Conference. I do a show called Broker Connect. That was kind of the start of it. We only had like 20 owner operators there. There was probably 1,000 people at the conference. Those guys were like the stars. Every broker there wanted to find those guys and talk to them.
That's awesome.
And I said, go join your state trucking association, go to these events. Mark was showing me his profit and loss statement at the event. Most people would agree we've been at the bottom of the market this year, right?
I would hope so.
Mark's having his best year ever. Revenue wise, he's 20% above any other year he's ever had.
That's awesome.
But he made connections. He built relationships. He has a relationship with his insurance broker. I mean, virtually everybody that he needs to help him run his business, he took the time to say, I'm going to go meet them and sit down and talk to them. That's
awesome. Education is so important. And I think as we kicked off the show with talking about diets, and I think, a stronger focus maybe should be on the educational diet as well, of what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're listening to, and is it feeding you and your business and your family and your personal life? And if it's not, get rid of it.
Blythe, how crazy would it be for you if you could afford to either read or listen to audiobooks for 60 hours every week?
I would love it.
That's the opportunity they have. 60 hours. They complain that's not enough. They want to work more hours than that, but they're working 60 hours a week. They can listen that entire time. You could easily consume 3 to 4 books a week like that. Yeah. And that's what I did when I drove. There was always a book when I was driving, always.
Well, speaking of listening to shows and watching shows, where can folks, follow you and follow all of the educational content that you're putting out, join Let's Truck, do all of that good stuff?
Really, everything's at letstruck.com. I mean, we have other sites, but everything, you can find everything from there. Our show schedule's there. You can find the links to download our app to listen to the show. So that's really where they should go. And then you can always look me up on X because I'm on there most of the day.
That's awesome. I have a Post-it of all of the good stuff that you said, all the different timestamps of the good stuff that you said, and it is filled.
Thank you.
Kevin, I appreciate you coming back on. Appreciate you sharing so much of your time. We're at, almost an hour and 40 minutes here, and you've been talking all day, and I know you got other things to do. So deeply appreciate your time and sharing all of your insights, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, you're welcome. I always enjoy it. And I do have some really important stuff. I was serious. I'm going to go take a nap.
Well, I feel fired up now. I know we joked earlier before we started hitting record that, we both needed to go take a nap, but now I feel fired up. I'm going to go. No, I'm going to relax. It's It's been a
Well,
week.
thanks for having me. I always enjoy it, and I'll come back anytime you want.
Heck yes. Awesome. I'm going to take you up on that. So
All right.
hopefully we'll see each other in person again here soon at a conference in 2025. But thank you again. This was great.
You're welcome.
And hopefully we make trucking a little bit greater again in 2025.
That's the point.